Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us, talking about the book, The Names of My Mothers, written by Dianne Sanders Riordan. Daughter and birth mother meet after 50 years. Dianne shares a reunion in this powerful memoir. Dianne and her husband, Frank, reside in Buffalo, New York, where they resettled after 20 years serving as a Navy family. She received a BA in English from Rosary Hill College. A family advocate, she recently retired from the Mental Health Association of Erie County. Her poetry has been published in Women of the Vineyard, Volumes 1 and 2. And on today's program, we're talking about her book, The Names of My Mothers. Dianne, welcome to the program. Great to have you with us today.
Thanks so much, Rick. Glad to be here.
This is such a moving book, and let's go back to the very beginning. Let's talk about 1942, where life began for you. Let's talk about that, and then we'll bring it up to current time.
Well, in 1942, my birth mother found herself in Buffalo, New York. She is a Southern woman, and so she found her way to Our Lady of Victory, which was a home for unwed mothers, sent there by a priest friend that she knew from the South. And there I was born. I was surrendered. I was adopted by a wonderful family and became the first daughter of Helen and Bill Flory.
Dianne Sanders Riordan, our guest on the program. The book is called The Names of My Mothers. Her website is Dianne with two N's, sandersriordan.com. You can link onto that from our website, thisweekinamerica.us. And as you were growing up, you talk in the book that you were always wondering. You would look at people and think characteristics maybe like mine, maybe I could be part of that family. And you really were interested in your birthing story. And let's go back just a little bit. At what point did you realize that you were adopted, that the family that you were with was an adopted family?
There was no point that I didn't really know that I was adopted. My parents never kept that a secret from us. I was actually the oldest of 4 adopted children, all from different families. So it was a very unique growing up situation. But I always felt that I didn't belong someplace. You know, there was always a sense of looking around and not really looking like anyone, not having a mirror. Everything in my life was borrowed, you know, because when you are adopted, you are in fact given a different identity. Your original birth certificate is sealed. Your baptismal certificate is sealed, and you are given, in effect, a new identity. You become somebody else, and the somebody that you were born disappears, legally disappears, and you have no access to it. So therefore, you grow up with a borrowed existence. The name of my book almost was A Life No Longer Borrowed, but I was talked out of that for some reason or other. I guess they thought it was too difficult to remember.
Well, it's very descriptive as well. The name of the book is The Names of My Mothers. Dianne Sanders Riordan, our guest on the program. Book available at Amazon at Dianne's website. You can link onto our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and get all that information. And you actually described yourself at that time as restless. I mean, you really needed to know and talk about the adoption laws and how difficult it is in many states to really find out where you came from so you can go back and you can sort of retrace and try to figure out who you are.
The adoption, it might surprise people to know that the records were sealed only in the late 1930s, early 1940s. Before that, there was no such thing as sealed records. And only 2 of the states in the United States actually kept their records open. They never had sealed records, and that was Kansas and Alaska. And even today, only about 10 states have their records open to adult adoptees. So, you know, it was put into effect because at the time in the 1940s, it was an incredibly shameful thing for a mother to give birth outside of being married. And the mores and the social and the church and everybody, it was as if the child was a sin offering and they were left to be adopted, and the birth mother was expected to go on their way as if nothing had ever happened. Well, that really didn't work out so well for either the adopted children nor the birth parents, because innately there is a need to know, an absolute need to know our roots, our ancestry, where we came from. So it's difficult that living in that reality of not knowing is a very difficult way to grow. And I'm so grateful that the laws are in fact being opened at this time. There is actually a law before a federal law before President Obama asking that it is a national law that the records for adoption are open to all adult adopted people after the age of 18,
Well,
so
this
that it would be all over the whole United States.
it would be a lot easier as you try to place who you are. You have to hire an investigator, and she
Yeah.
calls, and let's talk about that night. Well, let's talk about the decision. How difficult was it? I'm sure you looked for yourself and you realized I need a private investigator to go out and get this information. Was that a difficult decision to get an investigator? And were you hopeful when you hired her that she was going to come up with information?
Well, by the time I hired Christine Lee, whose business is called Kinsolving, and ironically, Christine's business originates in North Carolina, which is where my birth mother came from. But at the time that I hired her, I had absolutely no knowledge of this. So I had seen an advertisement in a paper respective to adoption, that Christine Lee was in fact an investigator who specialized in connecting adopted people with their birth families. Um, I had done pretty much everything that I could possibly do to find my birth mother, and I knew from non-identifying information that she was already in her 80s. I was in my 50s, and I knew that I didn't have any time to waste. So I contacted Christine and didn't do anything about it. I just let her contract sit on my desk for an entire summer. And then when all my children went back to school, I found the contract again. It was expired. On a lark, I sent it off anyway. And within 3 days, I had the information of my mother and who she was and where she was.
And it was a birthday present of sorts to you. It's your 52nd birthday. You get the phone call that gives you the information. You've got a name, you've got a number, and suddenly, what basically with the phone call, your life starts falling into place a little bit.
That's right. That's right. And I didn't, in the excitement of finding out that Christine had actually found my mother, I didn't realize that the day that I would receive my information was in fact my birthday, until my son brought it to my attention and said, "Mom, your identity, your heritage, this will be your birthday gift." And indeed it was.
You say in the book is The Names of My Mothers, Dianne Sanders Riordan, our guest on the program. Her website is diannesandersriordan.com. You can get that information link on directly at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. The book available Amazon all across the country. In the book, you talk about you wrote down her name, you wrote down your name, and you wept. It was sort of like, okay, now I can start putting this together, almost like you really found your identity at that point.
That is correct. That is correct. And and I did call her that night, and I called her because it was my birthday, the day that I received my information. And I had been warned that this may, in fact, be the only contact that I would ever have with Betsy Sanders, because she, in any reunion or any reunion scenario, there are two people, and you have to be respectful not only of your own needs and desires, but also of the needs and desires of the person that you are contacting. So my mother grew up with an absolute expectation of my never finding her, because she believed and bought into the laws of secrecy. So I knew that she may hang up, she may be angry, she may be happy. I had no idea. So it was an incredible risk sitting down in my den that night and making this phone call. It was definitely the hardest call.
And as you put aside sort of that fear in your dialing and you hear the voice and you explain who you are, and she says, "What do you want from me?" I'd almost think at that point you're inclined maybe to hang up and think this is a bad idea and move on. How difficult was it? Because I'm sure you're trying to weigh where you go based on her voice, her
Oh,
attitude when you call and she says, "What do you want from me?" How did you handle that moment?
well, it wasn't even that gentle. It was, what do you want from me? It was a real defensive response. And my response was just, I don't want anything from you. It was just a heartfelt response. It was, I just want to know that you're okay. I want you to know that I'm okay. And I want you to know that I've always loved you. And then there was this incredible silence. And then she said, I have always prayed for you. Phew. I could
Yes,
then relax.
you could breathe a little bit at that point.
Yes,
You send a
yes.
letter and that goes off and you wait for like what about a month? Did you think when you didn't get a response, and I'm sure every day as the mail carrier is coming, you're thinking, okay, today's going to be the day. Had you given up hope? I mean, a month's a long time on something like this when you're expecting and hopeful for a response.
Again, it's that sense of waiting and that respectful, it's a respectful waiting and a sense of being very protective of the other person. So yes, I waited every day, and certainly I went to the mailbox every day, but there was nothing in me that wanted to hurry the process. I felt that it would, in fact, unfold. And she had spoken to me already. So I felt that in her time, she would, in fact, respond.
There's so much that people can learn going through the same situation, that uncertainty. And your mother says to you, I've got a problem facing this, and
Yes.
please be patient with me. That probably sort of what sums up that relationship early on. You're just sort of feeling your way here. I know you would like to rush in, but you're understanding I have to be more measured than that.
Yes, yes, and so everything took time. In fact, it took so much time that an entire year and a half went by before this northern daughter went to visit her southern mother in Smithfield, North Carolina. And you have to remember, my mother had not spoken a word about my birth, about my existence to anyone in her entire life. She hadn't even spoken about giving birth to her own mother. So it was a traumatic experience for her when I actually made that phone call. So I was willing to give her all kinds of space.
Well, in a year and a half, you traveled to Smithfield along with your daughter, and you would drive past the house. You're sort of putting it all together. Then finally, you go to a phone and you call your mother, and I'm here, and you go out to the house. And as you're leaving, she's going to mass the next day at 8 o'clock. You ask if it's okay. I'll go to a later mass, and she has you come to the 8 o'clock mass, but introduces you basically as a friend and her daughter who are passing through. So you meet family members at that point. Only at that point they don't know you're a family member.
That, that's right. That's right. That was quite a surreal experience. Because my mother started out the whole conversation of my meeting her with, how afraid she was, and she didn't want her so-called cover blown. And then by the end of that conversation, she invites me to go to the 8 o'clock mass, which is the mass that her entire family goes to. So I know that I'm going to be seeing at least members of my family that I knew I would recognize from all of the pictures that had been so far shared with me. So it was quite a surreal experience.
For someone who has been for all these years trying to fill in the blanks, you're there at mass, even though nobody really knows who you are. You're looking around and you're talking about, now I know who I am. I really know who I am. Was there almost like a calmness that comes over you at that point as you're understanding where you fit in now?
Um, Probably I would say yes, because I'm looking. I grew up in a household where I was standout tall. My dear adopted mother, who was a beautiful woman, she was only 5'2", if she was 5'2", that was a lot. I was always so much taller, so much darker, so much. so much different from the family that I grew up in. And so I meet my mother. She's a tall woman. I look around, I see my aunts, my cousins, my uncle. They're all tall people. So I know my people are tall people, and I feel more like an insider, not an outsider, even though I'm not recognized as family yet.
The book is The Names of My Mothers. Dianne Sanders Riordan, our guest on the program. The book is available at Amazon, at Diane's website, DianneSandersRiordan.com. Information at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You can log on and get that information there as well. Just moving the story forward, and it really is such a touching book. And as your life sort of unfolds in front of you, your mother's in the hospital, you are visiting her, but again, you're just sort of a friend who happens to be in town who's visiting her. They don't think your mother's going to make it. She does make it. She goes home. And you decide at some point that, okay, I'm at peace with myself. I am just going to bow out of her life. I've reestablished that relationship. I love my mother. She loves me. But I'm at peace with myself. I'm just going to move out of the picture. How difficult was it to make that decision and to be at peace with yourself?
The hospital visit that you allude to, when my mother was dying. I mean, I was told that there was no chance that she was going to come home from this hospital, and so I went down to see her. She did not want me there. She was very uncomfortable that I was there. She did not feel safe. Too many family members were coming, and so I left, and I went back up north with the promise that I would be told if anything happened to her. She had confided in one sister, and that sister was the person who said that she would let me know when my mother passed. So instead, I get a phone call from my aunt saying, "Your mother is holding court with all your cousins." So this was absolutely devastating for me, because at that moment I realized that I was a drain on my mother's energy, and she was comfortable with all of my cousins. And so I felt dismissed, and I felt that my mother needed to put all of her energies into becoming whole and well again if she was ever going to leave the hospital. And so she did leave the hospital, and it was her leaving and her trying to get well that gave me this impetus to say, you know what, I'm going to back out. I wrote the letter to my Aunt Susan, who was the only one who knew of my existence, and made it very clear, though, that if Betsy had a change of heart, that I was available. I would be there. So with that, I found peace, and I thought, I am grateful for what is. I will let that be enough. So yes, I was at peace.
And then, as fate has it, she welcomes you into the family. She decides to share you, and you describe that as, I am visible. I am now a member of the family. Talk about the feeling when you realize, okay, everything is out in the open. I can now be a family member.
That was an incredible experience. It was a wonderful to go down to the South and to be myself, to be her daughter and not just a friend passing through. It was like a homecoming. It was a homecoming, but it was strange. I didn't feel like I was the guest coming to the South, coming to this wonderful Southern farmhouse. I almost felt like I was the hostess. And my mother gave me that empowerment. She welcomed me so strongly, and my relatives were so kind. And so, I mean, it just felt like a natural place to be. It was a homecoming.
It is a powerful book, The Names of My Mothers. Dianne Sanders Riordan, our guest in the program. Just unfortunately, time going by too quickly. Just a few minutes left in the program. And you mentioned how important it is that we change the laws. So you wouldn't, I mean, when you look back, it's like, yeah, I found out and things worked out. I was part of the family. I was there with the family as mother passed. But there were 50 years when you probably would have liked to have known, at least 30 or 40 of those when you became an adult, would like to get those answers. Do you think that we'll see a loosening of these so people don't have to go through 5 decades of trying to figure out where they fit?
Now your question was, do I feel that the laws should be changed?
Yeah, do you think that we're going to see, you mentioned it loosening now in some states and nationally, that could happen?
Yes, I do believe that it's very, very important that this happen. It's like you're disenfranchised. It really is a civil rights issue. Um, yes, I do believe that it's terribly important that people have access to their roots, to who they are. It's a very, very difficult. It's very difficult to live in a vacuum without a sense of belonging.
You know,
And even though we belong to our adoptive families too, we never, my story is not a repudiation of my adopted family. It's just that to be whole, knowing is everything, knowing is sacred. And it's the knowing that brings us to a sense of wholeness. And that's what my story is about. And that's why the laws need to be changed.
well, and it's not a story of regret either, is it? As
No,
you're reading this, it's like it's handled so well because it's like I would like to get answers to these questions. I would like to put the puzzle together. But you're right; it was not a repudiation of your family. It certainly wasn't with anger or regret.
no, not in any way, shape, or form. But it is that sense that knowing is holy. Knowing is what makes a person whole. And we all want to be whole as we can be.
Well, I go back to your thought as you're there, and the family is aware of who you are when you say, "I am visible and all is well." It was excellent having you on the program. Just a powerful book. The Names of My Mothers. Dianne Sanders Riordan, our guest on the program. Information available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Dianne, the time went by way too quickly. Thank you for sharing the story and an excellent job with the book.
Thank you so much, Rick.
You're welcome. And again, all the information available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us.